Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar in our series for aerospace and defense here at Infor. So we're joined today by a couple of friends and colleagues. So Josh Walter from Guide Technologies, one of our Gold Channel partners, and Pat Pullen from Intergris Composites, who is one of our customers and is undergoing this journey transformation to CMMC compliance. Part of that includes, obviously, an ERP system upgrade. So we're going to talk today a little bit about their journey and their pathway to sort of getting there and get some feedback, and then hopefully provide some good information to everybody listening who's going through the process or is considering undertaking it. So I appreciate both of you joining me. So with that, if we can kind of get started, Pat, can you kind of tell us about Intergris Composites' critical missions, products, support, and what prompted the company to undertake both a CMMC compliance initiative and an ERP modernization at the same time? Was this primarily driven by customer demand, regulatory requirements, business transformation goals, or was it a combination of everything?
Sure thing. We are an armor protection company and for the military and law enforcement. And our mission critical goal is to protect our kids, whether they're 18 or 99. We need to protect them, and that we take that very, very seriously. Our goal to start the CMMC journey was because it's customer driven. We have to be CMMC certification. We have to get our CMMC certification so we can get customer contracts. And if we don't have those, then we can't continue the business. Before I started, we were on the journey, but not a lot was done for the CMMC process.
Okay. And I guess every manufacturer starts from a different place. So before the project began, what were the biggest operational, technical, or cybersecurity challenges that you were trying to solve? And how did those challenges influence your decision to modernize your business systems?
Yeah, a lot of what factored into it is our ERP package was from 2012, and no more updates / security patches were done. And with the CMMC process, you have to be able to patch the software. You have to stay up current on the security system. So that was not going to work with us. And that was our number one goal, is to start the CMMC, to start with the ERP package implementation. We also had old equipment that we needed to get replaced and get updated for more security and more different processes and different items that we could utilize better.
Sure, that makes sense. And I guess, obviously as part of that, you have to go through a selection process. So you guys selected Infor's Cloud Suite and Industrial, or Sightline as it's known, and AWS's GovCloud, which is CMMC ready both as a product and as a cloud, as the foundation for the transformation. So what factors led to the decision for that particular product suite, and why was a government cloud deployment important for the year-long business transformation strategy?
Well, we went through and we interviewed a lot of different ERP packages, and to me, it was a no-go, a stop right then if they weren't in government cloud or GCC high or something like that, FedRAMP, because when I first started, I was the sole IT person, and I did not want to go through the certification and have any kind of questions and try to defend why I didn't do it with government cloud, why was it outside the scope, and defend whether or not CUI was being put into our ERP package. So that was a huge contributing factor, and I've done that on everything we've done to get ready for the CMMC. If it's critical and it would apply, it's all FedRAMP software, SaaS, anything like that. We've continued on that path, and I think it's been successful because we're going from level 2 to level 3 whenever it's available. So we're trying to get ready early.
That makes total sense. And I mean, in terms of the platform itself for Sightline or Cloud Suite Industrial, you guys had other options to look at. We have multiple cloud offerings that are CMMC compliant. What made you guys choose that? Was it just right size for the business, or what were the factors that led to that decision?
It was the right size. I've already was somewhat familiar with Sightline. I was familiar with Guide Technologies. They made the best presentation. They had, during the presentation, talking with the rest of the group, they had what seemed like Sightline fit and did what we needed to do.
Awesome.
One of the major goals of our president was out of the box. Let's not make any customizations. Got to be out of the box to be able to do the business. We needed to change our business with procedures and different things like that to run in the sightline. So, and we were successful in that.
I think that makes sense because the process, especially following the Infor deployment method and the aerospace and defense, process intelligence catalog, will tell you, what industry best practice looks like, as you said. And so it becomes a question of if you can adopt it, unless there's we have the 60-30-10 methodology, we call it, right? So 60% can usually be configured as recommended, 30% requires some minor differentiation, and then 10% or less ends up being something that requires a reconfig or like a report or an integration or a form, because every business does something differently, right? So, otherwise everybody would be the same price point, same quality, there'd be no market differentiation. So there's a recognition that there's always going to be little bits and pieces that'll be unique, but that's because every business does something different. So, but that's the right way to approach it from an executive standpoint. The president's kind of set the project out right from the beginning. Change management is always one of the most difficult things, at least I found through the course of the implementation work I've done over the years. And a desire to do it we've always done it because that's how we do it, as opposed to this is the best practice and the way to do it and the way to make it most cost efficient and the most up to date and automated is the right way to go. And unfortunately, there's a lot of pushback. So that's great that happened. How's that been working so far in terms of following that method?
It's been working great since we did have to have a little bit of customization because some very unique specificities, but
yep.
It's been really, really working great. Now that we've implemented, now we're going back and seeing what didn't we implement and doing that now, and what really makes sense to do small customizations we got the core's running really well. What can we do now to make it even better?
Amazing. And so I think, many companies view CMMC as just like another compliance requirement. At what point did the leadership team begin to recognize that cybersecurity and digital transformation needed to address together rather than sort of separate initiatives?
When I started in 2022, the board of directors was already in favor and pushing hard for CMMC compliance. So we had the backing of the board. The president was already on board with that. So the direction of the company has always been, we need to do this. We have to get the CMMC certification. It's coming. Our board is coming. The date's coming. So we're gearing up to that. Plus, in 2024, we had a new CFO started, and he also knew the ramifications of not being compliant and helped drive that initiative into the company.
Makes sense. And so if you look back at the beginning of your CMMC journey, what were the first practical steps the organization took, and were there any surprises or misconceptions that changed once you got into the implementation?
The first steps is I knew the ERP was going to be the most critical and the most affecting everybody, and probably the longest and the hardest to change. So I wanted and pushed for and got the ERP started there. I was the only IT person, so I was devoted myself to just the ERP, and it got hard with me just being by myself doing ERP and CMMC. So I was able to hire a CMMC person. That helped a lot. What really made a critical decision differently for the CMMC was after we got the ERP implemented, then I turned my focus to the CMMC, and I actually took a class. I took the CMMC professional class. Didn't get my certification, that's fine, but I got a class, and it was an eye-opening, awakening experience. I thought I knew what was involved in the assessment. This really taught me more. This taught me what they're going to ask. And then when I came home, it really hit the fan, and a lot of things got changed, and it got to be where we were pushing. This has to be done in every week increments. Laid out the project for that. The surprising was it's the whole cost. The cost of the CMMC, the cost of an ERP inside the CMMC. Those are amazing. How high the cost of CMMC is, how much time it takes, and I did actually the class in April 15th at CS5 West is when I did that class. So we had always been working on it, but since then it went hard and fast right after that.
Because I think that's a misconception a lot of folks have. If you just buy a new ERP system, you're automatically going to be CMMC certified at the end of the process. And there's 110 controls for level 2, right? And not everything applies to the ERP system. There's processes outside the system that you have to be able to make sure that your document, there's a whole bunch of stuff that takes place outside of your business systems that's required to get CMMC certified. And that requires, audits and prep and all these other things. So there's all these, like you said, these hidden costs and things outside of the system that sort of add up that people, if they don't do their homework, find themselves surprised with. So, I mean, that's pretty common that, I'm seeing as well, kind of across the industry. So that tracks with what we're seeing. And Josh, just to bring you in, so turning to Guide, I've worked with you for a long time. You've helped a number of manufacturers modernize their ERP environments very successfully. What makes implementing an ERP for a defense contractor, particularly CMMC, different from a traditional manufacturing ERP implementation?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for having me join here. This is a great conversation. But I would say that the biggest difference between implementing a defense contractor and just a traditional manufacturing company is you really need to start with the CUI. Where is the boundary? What does it touch? Who's going to touch it? Where it flows? And really, that is going to shape how you configure the system, how you set up your security profiles, what systems are you going to integrate. It just really changes the framework of how you configure an ERP. And then there's additional layers. The infrastructure, like Pat mentioned this, like he didn't want to deploy any systems that weren't FedRAMP authorized because that just adds a whole nother layer of risk, compliance, things that he's going to need to own and configure and maintain to maintain the CMMC compliance. So at the end of the day, it's a manufacturing company. You're still making a widget. You're still making an item. But there's just another layer that I think is a barrier to entry for a lot of small to medium-sized manufacturers to go after contracts, to try to go after the business in the defense supply chain, which is why I really appreciate Infor's strategy of hosting the entire ERP in the AWS GovCloud, and that FedRAMP authorized solution is a big differentiator.
Makes sense. And I think you hit on a key point there. A lot of businesses, particularly if they're looking at it now, are trying to figure out for themselves. So CUI, or controlled unclassified information, like you said, is at the heart, which derives from your contractual obligations on the defense side, or it's listed in the RFP now that you have to respond to the solicitation. I mean, just in general terms, how should companies be thinking about that? How do they identify whether they have the requirements, how do they identify what elements of CUI that they may have in their environment in general, whether or not they store it in their systems is a different story.
Yeah, Pat, do you want to run through how you guys do it on your side, or?
Well, we take we have an engineering department, and our engineering department, if they decide what's CUI, what's not, if we produce it. And the thing with CMMC and CUI, everybody who makes the document, they have to defend it and they have to mark it as CUI, and then we have to respect and do it from there. We can't judge it on our own that this is CUI, or we should go back to them who made the document and say, this looks like CUI. You need to really redo this and mark it as CUI. So it's really on the person who made it. And like Josh said, where is the CUI flowing? That's a huge thing. We took the step that said the whole entire company can have CUI. So the boundaries is the whole entire company. So everything is involved in that.
That makes sense. And so that all flows from your contractual obligations, right? So you guys went back to your contracts and knew what was coming in terms of solicitations and said, hey, we have the DFAR clauses that are mandating this, or we will have them. And then it sounds like a very deliberative process where your engineers went through and based on the DoD regulations said, okay, these subsets of information qualify as controlled unclassified in our environment. And then you mapped where they went after that.
Yes.
Just from a process flow. So for everybody listening, that's kind of how it's done. Okay, cool. So I think one of the biggest concerns companies have with compliance efforts that it'll slow down the business. So how did Intergris and Guide teams, how did you guys work together to ensure that the security requirements improved business processes instead of creating additional administrative burden?
Do you want to take it, or you want me, Josh?
Why don't you start? I'll fill in.
Yeah. We had no choice. We have absolutely no choice. It's the price of doing business for us. All management knew that. All the employees knew that. Um, it's the price of doing business. So, and also we knew going from such an old ERP package, we saw what was coming and available on Sightline. So we were excited about that. So it was driven into that. Um, Even redoing the procedures, it was a huge benefit to our company. We took the time to actually re-looked at everything in our business. So we've gained a lot of benefits because of that.
And that makes sense.
Yeah,
And like you said, you had an older system, so that makes total sense to me. Josh, what did you
yeah,
experience from the partner side?
yeah. I was just going to say, so a lot of the controls in CMMC and the NIST 800 kind of align with an ERP implementation. Like you're redoing processes, you're understanding security profiles, you're reconfiguring things. So I think there's a lot of synergies just in the documentation that you're putting together that you usually
Sure.
do in an ERP implementation. Documentation is a huge part of the 110 controls. It's just making sure you have your systems documented and what the processes are. So there is a lot of synergies in an ERP implementation. I think a challenge that, and Pat kind of referred to this earlier, a challenge that a lot of the SMB has is that usually falls on IT, or there's you need to be a contracts officer, a cybersecurity officer, and the IT ERP implementation project lead. So there's challenges just with the level of workload that falls on the ERP team, but there are a lot of synergies.
And that's true because I mean all of those requirements usually get levied over towards the IT folks, or if they don't have an internal compliance person, that's a separate job. But I always remind people, even in the context of this, it's a business transformation project. It is an IT business system, but the business is where the transformation is taking place. And when they toss it back on the IT team as if they're going to run and do everything, that's where I see a lot of projects fail, when there isn't that ownership on the business side where the transformation has to take place as well. So it's not just in the digital systems. So I mean, again, we see this all the time. That makes sense. And in the context of that, again, oh, sorry, Pat, go ahead, please.
I
I thought you were about to say something. I apologize. I thought you were about to say something. I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
So I guess every implementation has unexpected challenges. So without revealing anything proprietary, what were some of the biggest things that you guys learned during the project itself? And then how did the combined project team overcome those obstacles?
So for us as the PM manager, IT and PM manager, to go on what Josh just said, almost everything's like falls on my shoulder eventually. So in charge of it, when you start to feel things aren't going right, make a change. Don't be afraid of it. Like if you have one team leader who thinks they need to do everything, make the change. Add more people, even from his own department, into his group. Add a couple people. You can't do it alone. No department can do it alone. And it's better to sometimes ask for forgiveness later rather than ask for permission. You just got to kind of do that. Also, why I made it successful was I engaged in users face to face. I was able to go down to the hallway, sit in people's offices. I attended every single ERP meeting we had, every meeting with Guide. So our users felt like they weren't by themselves. It was definitely a team effort. Somebody was in charge, somebody to help them out and not make them feel alone.
Okay, makes sense. What about you? What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I kind of referred to this previously, but I think that the biggest thing you want to do first is just mapping your COI. Understand the scope of it, where it's going, before you start configuring the system. I think if you do these projects separately, you're going to run into a lot of rework or reconfiguring. And then another tip or lessons I've learned over the past 18, 24 months of doing this and the CMMC rollout of this is it really needs to be a business transformation, like you said. It's the typical ERP implementation, but the CMMC can't be a destination. The really goal is you're trying to set up business systems that are secure, good, healthy business systems. If you're going to just try to get a checkbox, you're going to be in a rude awakening next time you implement something new or you reconfigure something. You're going to be constantly battling that. So if if the goal is to set up healthy systems and processes, it's going to be much easier in the future.
That makes sense. And I alluded to this before, and it kind of ties in the conversation we're having now. So CMMC touches more in the IT department. Like we said, everything gets shoved on your shoulders, but it touches way more than that. So how did you engage, manufacturing, engineering, quality, supply chain, finance, executive leadership throughout the implementation to make this an enterprise-wide initiative, Pat?
So, I mean, the good news is we did the ERP implementation. Everybody used to, like the whole company being touched. Everybody knew what was coming on. Everybody knew this was like stage one of the whole entire CMMC process. So, and it went immediately from the ERP to finishing up the CMMC. So it wasn't a surprise for anybody, and the whole company was backing it.
Okay, so it was early communication on to everybody that this was a company-wide project, and did that come from the rest of the executive team too, to make sure there was a unified front?
Oh yeah, yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, the president was backing everything, backing the ERP implementation, the whole company. He was very high directed that we are now going the ERP implementation. The company's going on that way, and now the company's doing the CMMC. So it's talked about in upper management. It's talked about everywhere about it.
Yeah, I think that's important because from an executive standpoint, if we don't have an executive sponsor or partner who's helping to drive and it's being driven from the bottom up, not only do you not get the buy-in right, but then I've also seen where, you get the design phase up front, even if you're following the process catalog, and people want to deviate or do what they want, and all of a sudden the executive team shows up for the first conference room pilot. And why is this process designed this way? Well, because you chose not to participate in the project at the beginning, you delegated to somebody, and they did it the way that they thought was right. So that executive participation up front is critical for so many factors. And that's why the first part of the in-for deployment method in the inception phase, or the project kickoff actually calls for an executive alignment meeting right in the beginning to make sure the executive team's aligned, right up front. So it's built in the methodology for a reason. That makes sense. Okay. So you implemented Cloud Suite Industrial or Sightline, right? Were there operational improvements that became apparent well before CMMC certification? And have you begun seeing any improvements in visibility, standardization, traceability, decision-making, et cetera, as you're, doing testing, training, deploying, through that whole process? Were you able to see those results?
Yeah, so actually we just had a meeting with Guide Technologies to share a lot of good news about the implementation. It's been almost a year now since we went live. So during the journey, our customer, before they would approve us changing ERP package, and we were already pretty well into the implementation, we had to have a demo with a customer. And so we had our power user in operations do the demo, and they did production recording, they did traceability, and during the presentation, they stopped and said, well, how long would it take you if we gave you a shipped part to give us the traceability from shipment all the way to purchase order? And our guy was a little bit nervous, said, if you give me 10 minutes, I can get that for you. And they were shocked because they said most vendors want 2 to 3 weeks for that. So that right there is a huge benefit, huge benefit. So then actually the story goes on. It's even better news than that. We just had our ISO AS number, and I'm not going to give numbers, AS audits. And our ISO auditor said he wanted to know what software we're running and who was our implementation people, because they don't normally do it, but there are a lot of people struggling with traceability. And they said, this is one of the best traceabilities they have ever seen in all their time they've worked. So that is just awesome. It's amazing what it can do. And we also did share Guide and Sightline's information with them.
That's fantastic. So Josh, for Guide, many defense manufacturers are still evaluating whether or not this is the right time to modernize their ERP while they're preparing for CMMC. Based on your experience, what advice would you give an organization that's debating whether or not to take these initiatives separately or together? I know you touched on it a little bit before, but what do you think?
Yeah, man, that's a hot button item right now. Seems like a lot of things have rolled out in the last 18 months on what should we tackle first. So we hear about it all the time. And like I said earlier, it really needs to be a joint project. If you modernize your ERP, you implement this ERP and then try to bolt on or retrofit CMMC, you end up reconfiguring a lot of things. You're changing security profiles, you're changing the way the process flow works. So you're doing a lot of rework. And then vice versa, if you try to tackle CMMC or compliancy first, then you end up, redoing a lot of your documentation, you're redoing your system, your security plans, your documentation, because it changes. Because now the ERP is probably the biggest source of operational data in a company. So if you modernize that after your CMMC, you're going to have to redo all your documentation, or a lot of your documentation. So I think it really needs to be a joint project.
No, I think so. That makes sense to me too. And doing that together and then achieving the results that Pat just kind of laid out. I mean, they go hand in hand, right? So you get certification, and then you also do the business process improvement at the same time in the transformation, and you land in a much better spot. You are ready and able to win new contracts, because now under the requirements, right? If you're not certified, you're not registered in the system, the contracting officer can't award if the clauses are in your defense solicitation and the contract award. And then if your system is old as dirt, for lack of a better term, right? If it was a POS system used at the Last Supper, was always the joke I would get from folks back in the day, a 2,000-year-old system. You end up with old technology, old processes. It doesn't work. It doesn't support the needs of the community now, particularly with the additional regulatory requirements, business requirements that are levied, and the system really needs to be there to automate that. Otherwise, it ends up with a bunch of manual workarounds, and then when people are doing that, that's taking up time and money. And I'm finding, at least from a lot of folks we work with, it's eating up production capacity, because they could be doing more, but they can't, because they're having to work around the system or processes outside the system with the business, and you don't get maximum efficiency out of the company at a time where we're looking at a massive increase in defense spending. We're going from $1 trillion to 1.5 trillion, 50% increase, right? It's about 5% of GDP to match what we're asking our NATO allies to spend, and on the commercial side of the house for the commercial folks, there's at the highest level, we're seeing orders for 2,200 planes a year now, large commercial aircraft, and we're only able to fulfill as a community 1,400 of that. So there's an 800 delta that grows every year and adds to the backlog. Aircraft now delayed to 2030s, 2040s. So it's like a dual ramp in the community, both on the defense and the on the commercial aviation side, feeding from the same industrial base, right? So there's just a lot of demand on the system right now, and if you need to maximize utilization of your facility without spending a lot of money on infrastructure to help expand the size of the business, I found that one of the best ways to do that is through modernizing systems and getting those processes implemented, and at the same time you achieve certification. So that's kind of what I'm seeing across the industry. I don't know if you seen the same thing, Josh, in terms of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And to Pat's point, he referenced this in his last comment, but just a lot of the small manufacturers right now in the DAB are doing all of this outside the system. It's Excel spreadsheets. It's and that's where hey, can you prove traceability? I'll get that to you next month. It could take 2 or 3 weeks to get that or turn around that data. Not having a modern system is what leads to those time. Where it is in CSI and Sightline in a modern ERP, all of that's in the system, and it's just, hey, I just need to run this report, and you can prove that traceability and that compliance a lot easier. And I think that was, Secretary Hegseth's goal with modernizing the acquisition system, is to increase the speed at which we're able to meet the demands of our military today.
I think so. So, I mean, he's right on the process, and the Pentagon has also been big in pushing the adoption of artificial intelligence and other modern platforms. So looking beyond certifications, how do you see modern ERP platforms enabling future capabilities like AI, workflow automation, predictive analytics, and like a more resilient supply chain, while maintaining compliance with evolving defense cybersecurity requirements? So I know it was a mouthful.
I can jump in there. And that's where I really appreciate Infor's strategy of hosting all of this stuff in AWS GovCloud in a FedRAMP authorized environment. Is the infrastructure is already approved, right? So, and I know Infor takes that very, very stringently or strictly, maintaining that authorization. There are very few vendors that have that out there today, where you can run agents and AI in a secure environment. So it's, and I think there are other tools out there right now, AI tools to help with audits, DCA audits, to help with making sure your documentation is in line. So I think AI is really going to help our small suppliers with the compliance pieces of it. And then all the other business benefits of AI and agents, and from buyers, procurement agents, all of the different agents that are coming out today leveraging AI. It's going to modernize the business, but there's also going to be applications of AI to help with compliance and audits, which is going to be huge for the SMB and the people that have a PAT or a one contact to help with all these different roles.
With everything. Yeah, no, it's important because I think all the investments in artificial intelligence, everything are being made on the cloud side. So if you do the transformation, that's where all the future investment is going for that, and having that integrated there, having agentic AI in our offering for Velocity Suite, and going through CMMC audits and being available in GovCloud. Those are all things that we're particularly proud of, and we need to enable. Like you said, there's always this focus on the high end of the market in terms of the largest prime defense contractors, but the vast majority of companies in the DIB are in the SMB space. They're the ones that are helping to protect the nation, and they're not there's not a lot of platforms that are available in a cost-effective manner to give them all of those extra tools to make sure that they're able to manufacture and get things out the door. And I mean, we're not talking about making trinkets, right? These are national defense equipment we're talking about here that are meant to protect people. So without our folks in the community doing what they do, we'd be in trouble. I mean, that's how I landed here at Infor. I'll just give a quick story, because for people like Pat, and the work that Intergris does, I wouldn't be here. I mean, quite literally. I remember a particular incident in 2008 in Iraq. The vehicle I was riding in, I asked my driver to pull next to what ended up being a roadside bomb, or that hadn't been detonated, remote control, because we had a jammer in the back of the truck to kind of protect the rest of the guys that were out there until we could get because there was no way to move to pull everybody out until we get EOD to come in and sort of take care of the explosive. And while we're there, the lights flashing on the jammer, basically indicating that there was some sort of indication that somebody was trying to set it off while we were in there. And I'm looking out my window at this explosive, and I'm looking at the jammer in the back. And between the vehicle we were riding in, the radios that we were using there at that point, the boards and the jammers, all of it was manufactured in Infor software, all of it. And if any of those points had failed, if our DIB folks had failed, they hadn't delivered, I wouldn't be here along with a bunch of other folks. The work that our community does is incredibly important. And whatever we can do to help enable that and get people through that transformation process, I think is, we're better for it. So thank you to Pat and the rest of the team there for the work that you guys do, because you do have a big impact. I'm sure you guys don't hear that a lot, but what you do on the receiving end is incredibly appreciated. So I'll get off my soapbox. Just very thankful to have you guys for that. So I guess looking beyond that, so we touched on the AI piece a little bit, and that's going to be, we have the availability of the commercial side coming on the GovCloud side as well through Velocity Suite. If another defense manufacturer called you tomorrow, this is for both of you, and today we're just at the beginning of our CMMC journey, what are the first three pieces of advice you would give them to maximize their chance of success?
I'll go start it. Sure, take the class. Do the CMMC professional. Best thing, probably go ahead and get the certification. Get the background. Get to know what they're going to be asking and looking for when they do an assessment. Attend a conference. I attended the CS5 West. I'm going to go to the CS5 East. There are other conferences that are out there that are just as good. Pay for a readiness assessment. It paid for itself. And we thought we knew everything they were going to look at. You work hard on it. You look at this stuff all the time. They're looking at it from the outside, asking different questions than you never thought. So that readiness assessment was so worth it.
That makes sense. Josh, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah. I mentioned this a couple times, but I think the first thing you really need to do is understand the requirements in your contracts. Understand what level you are, what your CUI boundary is, who's going to be touching it, what kind of flow downs requirements, the DFARS requirements that you guys are going to need to meet. I think that's really important. Second thing is try to, and Pat mentioned this earlier, try to pick solutions where the infrastructure is already going to be FedRAMP or CMMC ready. That's really going to minimize the impact of what you're going to have to manage. So it's a huge part of the CMMC journey, is if you can offload that or get the compliance adopted by a vendor, by a solution provider, that's really going to help in the scope of your compliance. And then run it together. Run your modernization projects simultaneously. The ERP and the CMMC compliance. I mentioned it before. There's so much synergies in there with how you're going to be setting up security profiles and your process flows, and don't try to do one before the other. You're going to end up doing a lot of rework.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So, like you said, Pat, a little bit earlier, you guys have now been live for a year, so you've had a chance to work out all the kinks, get everybody, make sure they're good to go, training, go through all your testing, go live, and now you've got a year's worth of data to kind of look back on in performance. So 12 months afterwards, what metrics will tell you that this project has been a success beyond achieving CMMC? What business outcomes are you expecting to deliver for Intergris, its customers, and its employees?
So I can just quote the CFO. The numbers just make sense. I keep looking for something not to make sense, but it just works, and they are just the right numbers. During the ERP implementation, we did on time and on budget, which is unheard of. To quote the chairman of the board, it is so rare to have an ERP implementation that was on time, on budget, and had near no business impact. So, I mean, the credit goes to Guide Technology, the credit goes to all the teams and stuff, and all the employees of Intergris and stuff.
Yep.
So it was great. It was great. So that to me makes a successful implementation.
Yep, and then getting the outcomes on the back end that you needed as well. So it fixed all your operational issues that you guys had, that you, in terms of process transformation, kind of worked out the kinks through the implementation to do that change and transformation that you guys need on the business side.
Yes.
Yeah, take it. And Josh, you guys, when you went through this, obviously this is a very successful implementation. Pat was saying on time, on budget. You delivered the transformational results that were necessary. You guys have a very experienced team, best in class in the industry. As you're talking about this, do you guys follow the Infor deployment method as you go through for an implementation?
Yeah, very similar. We've got a deployment method called Rapid I25, which is a lot of the same stages as the Infor deployment method.
And all it's built around a risk-centric approach, right? To make sure you take the risk out during the implementation, do the testing, the training. Those failure points that we normally see that that your chairman was referring to in other cases where they don't go well, or they fail, or they go over. I found it's when people deviate from the implementation method that is specifically designed to work out these, or they don't do all of it to the fullest extent. They don't get all of the testing scenarios identified. They don't actually do the testing. Oh, we can have the consultants do that for us. Yeah, but then there's no transfer of learning knowledge, right? And the consultants know your business, but not as well as the person who does it every day. Did you get all the one-off scenarios in there? Did you make sure that all of those are configured and tested, so when you go live, you don't run into these scenarios where you don't have a process defined or how you're going to do that? And it's those types of things I think have always been important in working it out. And then being able to do that, like you said, and manage a project successfully on time and on budget. It's not easy because these are complex. So that's, it's a testament to Guide and working together with Intergris as a combined project team, because you can't be successful unless both sides of the combined project team are 100% on board and getting everything done that needs to be done and managing it correctly. So, it speaks volumes to both companies and we're talking to here. So with that, I'll close with a broader strategic question for both organizations. So as CMMC becomes the standard across the defense industrial base, do you believe the companies that succeed will be those that simply achieve compliance, or those that will use compliance as a catalyst for digital transformation? And what message would you leave the defense manufacturing executives who are watching today, who are considering starting this journey?
Sure, I can only say that we lost a contract, and the vendor who took the contract, they were not very far in their CMMC journey, or at all. I don't know. But our customer came back to us and gave us the contract because of where we were in that time frame and where we were about ready to be. So that journey was because of where we got that contract, just because we were so far advanced in the CMMC.
Incredible. Josh, anything for you for closing?
Yeah, I think we're kind of at a crossroads right now in the industry, especially in the defense industrial base. There is going to be a lot of opportunity just with some of the geopolitical where we're at in the world right now.
Yep.
There is a huge need for suppliers in the DIB. There's going to be a lot of contracts awarded. There's going to be a lot of money spent, especially with the new defense budget. There is going to be a lot of opportunity, and the companies that have already started their CMMC journey or their compliance journey are near the end of passing that audit are going to be the ones winning those bids, winning those contracts. So there's no shortage of opportunity coming. And I encourage everybody to not have it be a destination. CMMC is a don't look at it as I pass my audit and I'm done. It is really a business transformation. Change it, good cybersecurity habits, good business processes is what's going to separate everybody from their competition.
Amazing. Makes sense. Josh, thank you again for the partnership. Guide's done amazing work, continues to do great work in the community. So I appreciate you guys more than I can tell you. We've been working together for years. Looking forward to continuing that. And Pat, again, cannot thank you and the team, enough for what it is that you guys do, helping to keep the nation safe and, making sure that you're driving those outcomes and being able to get the product out the door and it's good quality and, men and women who need it, are getting it on time. So we really appreciate everything you guys do. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
You too, guys. All right, everybody. This will be the end of our webinar, and we'll see you at the next series.